What's up, Judah?
Not much, man. How are you today?
Uh, well, a little bit of a slow day today. Got all my work done early. It's great.
What?
Yeah, I mean, you know what? I got into vacation mode last week, and what I
Yep.
found is that, like, things that I would take 2 hours to do, I can do in 15 minutes.
Yep.
Like, and I think it upped my efficiency level, so that's good.
Yeah, when you're away on vacation and you want to get stuff done as quickly and as efficiently as possible, you really figure out what you're doing that's wasting a lot of time. I got to tell you, for me personally, how I always beat that is by having four major projects going on at any one time. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah.
I'm an executive, I'm a realtor, I'm a coach and mentor. I've got, some side hustle stuff going on, and doing all of that definitely keeps me busy. Dude, I gotta love it. I gotta give major props and shout outs to our regular viewers and listeners and commenters,
Right.
because we had likes and shares and even a love or two before the show even began today on some of the channels that this is broadcast on. So we certainly appreciate that. And this is the Build and Grow with Real Estate show. We do education, news, conversation about what is happening with the real estate world, the realtor world, the real estate investor world here on Real Estate Hackers platform. My name is Judah Hoover. I am an executive with Slate House Group and your local friendly neighborhood realtor. Josh, at some point, is going to put a graphic up there for me. But
I'm off here. I'm like fixing my collar.
Sorry, as I figured out last week, running the show is a very hard thing to do. But there's my contact information, 717-766-7994. I would love to talk with you about listing or buying any real estate that you're interested in. Right now is an awesome time to buy real estate because rates are as low as they are, right? And really, real estate values have not caught up with where rentals are. So now's a great time with where the rental market is. So now's a great time to buy rental properties. Also, because of the low inventory and the record high demand, it is an awesome time to be listing real estate. So if you're interested in listing right now, the whole there are whole segments of the economy that are just absolutely on fire right now. I talked to two people yesterday. One is a dear friend and regular listener of the show who's in the car business. And he said that, his real estate investing has had to be kind of put on hold recently because he's making as much money as he is buying and selling cars, which is an absolutely awesome thing. And I also talked to somebody else. Yep. So he is doing an amazing job right now in the car business. I also talked to somebody else who is in the business of who's looking to buy a car right now, and they unfortunately had to complain that it's a little bit difficult and they can't get as many great deals as what they would have liked because of where the car business is. So real estate is the same way. If you're interested in buying or selling any real estate, give me a shout and let's talk.
All right, so Judah, I want to kind of I want to go down a rabbit hole a little bit, but it has to do with where you are personally and whether you should buy or sell a house right now.
Yep.
Right? Like, if you are thinking about buying a house that you're going to be in for the next 5 or 10 years, now is a phenomenal time to buy, even though prices are ridiculously high, and it's very likely the prices are going to go down.
Right.
But because interest rates are so low, I think about, like, my first house, my first mortgage payment was 6.05% interest. It was fine. Who cares? We're talking about 3% interest rates at or about. You can get twice the house today at a 3% interest rate than you could have just a couple years ago at 6%. 6%. And what do you think is going to happen to interest rates over time? I mean, if you got a bet on it, they're going up. So if you're looking to buy for a long term, your family's moving, you're looking to ground yourself in a community, now's the time to buy. And if you're looking to sell, You might have been thinking about selling 6 months from now. I've been saying this for quite a few months that there's going to be a downturn. If you've been thinking about selling, now is the time. Get that house on the market. It will sell quickly. You'll get top dollar. Call Judah, right? And
Right.
if you are, even if you have to, rent a house for a little bit, like that's the truth of the matter. My in-laws, we've been trying to twist their arm to move into Central PA. We love it out here so much. They are out in Bucks County, and we've been trying to get them to sell their place and come out here. They're like, well, I don't have a house to move into. Well, last week while we were on vacation, we started talking to them about, hey, maybe you move and rent for a year, get great money for your property, rent for a year, and then buy something. I mean, like, there's different options. But if you are looking to sell, now's the time. If you're looking to ground yourself in a community, now's the time to buy that dream home if you're looking to. And if you're looking at your next rental property, it's the same deal. I think it's pretty cool that even with high prices, rental rates still makes sense.
Rental prices are still outstripping values on houses. Absolutely, and they're making a ton of sense. Josh, tell us who you are, and let's get into content.
My name's Josh Weidman. I've been a real estate investor since 2006, and over the years, I've been involved in a lot of different parts of the real estate business, but always grounded in real estate investing. Oh, my wife just said she found us a house. Perfect.
Nice.
So apparently I'm going to be moving. So if you are looking, I'm a hard money lender with Hard Money Bankers. I run our Central Pennsylvania branch. So if you are looking to fund your next real estate investment, give me a call. We are a direct lender, which means that we can move really quick. I've got very intimate knowledge of the local community and the local investment market. So if you call me on a deal, within a couple hours, I'm going to be able to get back to you with a quote on what we can lend on the property and a timeline on when we can close. If you've got all your ducks in a row, right? You're ready to go. Your title company is giving you the clear to close. You got your contractor ready. You've got all your ducks in a row. We can close the next day. Just a couple weeks ago, and I tell this story frequently now, but a couple weeks ago, I got a call on July 4th. The 3rd of July, right? At about 1:00 in the afternoon, we underwrote the loan, went to see the property, and by 6:00 at night, we were ready to close on the deal. We closed on Monday following the 4th of July at 3 p.m. We funded. So, look, if you are looking to fund your next project, give me a call, 717-213-8488, or you can check us out online at hardmoneybankers.com. So, Judah, I have been really humbled by the amount of people that have been checking out our show and giving the great comments and feedback on some of the content that we've been covering. And, yesterday we talked about how to take advantage of this coming, eviction crisis. Now I wanted to take a look today at the other side of the coin.
Right.
Because I read something yesterday that blew my mind. I mean, my hair didn't go white, but it might have. I read 40% across the country, 40% of tenants are at risk of being evicted.
Yeah.
That's insane. That's an insane number.
Josh, can you close a couple extra windows here? You're just a little bit clunky for me, and I know sometimes when you have extra windows open, that can be what happens.
All right, give me 1 second here.
Might just be my connection, but I doubt it. Yeah. So it's the thing that we always try to do here on the show is present both sides of the story, how to have both, take advantage of the situation, but then also what's our responsibility as investors, as landlords, as flippers to be good stewards of the economy and good players and good actors in everything that we have going on. So we have produced a little bit of content here for that today. So Josh, go ahead and let's get us started.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, give me half a second here. I'm closing windows and messing some things up. All right. So what I wanted to talk to, we kind of have to set a backdrop for this conversation, and the backdrop is a concept that I've been thinking about for quite some time. All right, I got the wrong window up here. There we go. All right. So if you look at this map, I stole this from the Forbes article. you can see that, depending on where you are in the
Not
country.
stealing if you give attribution back. If you give Forbes credit, they are happy to they are happy that we use their graphic.
Okay, so I borrowed it. All right, so if you look in here, you got states and their levels of exposure, let's call it, to foreclosure. I'm sorry, eviction. Man, if you look here, Pennsylvania is at 40%. It's right there, right in the average across the country.
Right in the middle.
Right. You've got states like Oregon and California and Arizona, and that are below us in the number of pending foreclosures. And then you got areas like Florida that are over 50%, Missouri, Tennessee, West Virginia. Actually, West Virginia is the highest in the country at 59%.
That's crazy.
Tenants. Yeah, it's pretty nuts. So in order for us to kind of look at this problem and come up with a solution, I thought it would be really advantageous to look at a concept that I've been looking at for quite some time. My wife is a teacher at a private school that is very well funded, that caters to financial underprivileged kids, right? And coincidentally, my dad went to school there. He was a teacher there. Now my wife is a teacher there. And over the years, like, I grew up and some of my closest friends are like brothers. They were graduates from this school, and I'm not going to name it, but you can kind of guess. But like, they were my heroes growing up. Like, really, they were like big brothers and things like that. And they've become a really big part of my extended family. So I've had an intimate relationship with this school since I was just a little kid. And over the years, what I've seen is this place used to train kids to graduate into a position where they could take care of themselves immediately.
Into a vocation,
into a situation that they were 100% responsible for themselves right away. And it's transitioned over the years into, I think, something a little bit different. And I'm bringing this school up because I think it's a really good sample or example of what we see in our country right now. And that is, there was a time when 12-year-olds were sent out to become apprentices, and they went to live with, the blacksmith, or they went to live with the carriage maker or whatever. And they were essentially slaves, for 5 or 6 years, indentured servants, we'll call it. But like, there was a contract against all of their work for 5 or 6 years where they worked their hands to the bone all day long. And there were things that were expected of them, not just learning, and by the time they were 16 or 18, they're off on their own. They're starting their own families. And, part of that is the shorter lifespan, and, there's arguments to be made there, but we expected things from people early on. Today, I don't know if you noticed this, but in December 31st at midnight, if you were 18, you can no longer buy tobacco products overnight. Now you have to be 21.
I didn't know that.
Across the country, right? And I look at that and I say, that's kind of an example of like a nanny state. Like, you're telling me you can go and fight in the military and go to battle, but you can't smoke a cigarette or buy a pack of cigarettes. Like, it's a little bit crazy. But regardless, this idea of responsibility versus a protectionary environment, I think, needs to be the foundation of our conversation. Because, with responsibility, we're going to hold people accountable for their actions and their decisions. That's, it's just the way it is. We're going to teach our kids and young people not, how to go out and get rich. We're going to, or how to read and write and all that stuff. That's part of it. But we're going to teach them how to think, how to behave properly, and how to perform in order to prepare them for when they grow up, to be adults. We want to make sure that when they leave the house, they can go out and be a grown-up, right?
Productive member of society.
Thank you.
This is such a key point. I've heard people talk about, somewhat, illustratively or tongue in cheek, but that we have a Statue of Liberty on the eastern shore of this country, on the western shore of this country, we should have a Statue of Responsibility. And that it is those two bulwarks that underpin democracy. Yes, we have a lot of freedom, but that freedom comes with a price, and that price is responsibility. There's a lot of people belly aching and arguing and fighting about what's going on in the nation right now, and they are upset at our leaders. And I got to tell you, masks, no masks, hysteria or calm, Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative, it's we get the government we elect. We get the government we deserve. We get the government that we are responsible for the government that we get. And the best way to change politics and the best way to change our nation is to change ourselves as individuals.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So the last part of responsibility, and this is a really big one, and it's a part of the other side of the coin, where you're not just responsible for yourself. You're going to be responsible for yourself first, but you're also responsible for your neighbor.
Right.
So if they are hurting, if they need help, if someone in your community needs a hand up, it's your responsibility to help, right? Like that's one part of the puzzle that a lot of people omit. And for that reason, I think it's opened the door to this protectionism that we're seeing trending in society right now. So the idea of protectionism on the flip side is, implementation of rules and oversight to prevent individuals from significant loss or pain. An example of this is like, hey, look, tenant can't pay their rent. Let's give them every opportunity in the known world, to stay in that house as long as they can and rectify the situation. Or more accurately, you think about if there's any accredited investors out there, accredited investors have the opportunity to invest in a little bit more risky investment environment, but the returns are so much better than anything that you see in the non-accredited environment. A 9 or 10% return rate is not that high. You see 15, 18, 20% returns with added risk, but accredited investors typically have higher net worth. They've got a little bit more.
There's an expected ability for them to be responsible to underwrite that own deal.
That's right.
And there's not as many agencies and alphabet soups who are watching over that. And so that's why to be in a hedge fund, oftentimes they require that accredited investor, and also to take place in certain private placement memorandums. It just makes it a whole lot easier if you limit them only to accredited investors, because the assumption is responsibility for the underwriting on the part of the accredited investor.
That's right. A lot of the protectionism removes the responsibility from the individual and places it on the collective as a whole. And it's like the collective, which ends up being government, is there to protect people so that they don't fall into these big traps and ruin their life and all of this and that. And then it's assuring that children are not subject to danger or stress, essentially, right? Like keep them sequestered and protected so that they don't have these terrible things happen in their lives, right? And it seems like a pretty decent idea, but the issue and I think that one of the attractiveness is part of the attractiveness of the protection angle is that it's easier than the responsibility angle. It's much easier to create a bunch of rules and regulations and just say, okay, we're just going to watch over them, put up a bunch of surveillance cameras to make sure people aren't sneaking around and doing what they're not supposed to, as opposed to teaching them, to be responsible, to be a functional and productive member of society. And so I think our society has shifted from one of responsibility, rights and responsibilities, to, protectionism and rights. So anyway, with that backdrop, let's take this in the context of the tenant landlord relationship, right? So for tenants, they should be able to stay on the property, whether they pay rent or not. They should, the landlord should make every effort to work out any kind of delinquencies, and regardless of how the tenant is maintaining the property. The landlord has an obligation to make sure that all the utilities are on, whether it's the tenant's obligation to pay them or not. They have an obligation to make sure that the property is well maintained and fix any damages, even if the tenant caused them.
Right.
And the tenants the landlords are in a position of power. And because they're in a position of power over the tenants, laws need to be there to shield the tenants in a landlord-tenant conflict. Okay. On the flip side, with the protectionism, there's also protectionism for landlords. Like, landlords, look, we have to protect these landlords so things don't blow up in their face. So they can only buy so many properties under their personal name with, certain lending guidelines. We're going to make sure that during this pandemic, mortgage companies and servicers, they just give them some room, back off, don't foreclose, all that kind of stuff. And maybe some of these are needed, maybe they're not. But what ends up
happening? You're not necessarily advocating for these positions. You're just saying that from a protectionist mindset, these are when you have a protectionist mindset, these are the applications. This is what happens as a result of that. Some good, some bad. And some would say we need like a yin and a yang, philosophy here, where we need to be a mix of responsibility and protection. But obviously, if we go purely protectionist, there's some problems. The next thing we're going to talk about is purely responsibility, and that ends up being there's problems with that as well.
Well, and I think that in a vacuum, the protectionist idea works really well. Because look, who wants to throw a tenant out in the street? Even landlords don't want to do that. If you don't believe me, ask a landlord who's going through an eviction. It costs money. It costs time. It's not fun. They'd much rather have the property well maintained and taken care of and all that kind of stuff. Tenants don't like it either.
Right.
In a vacuum, it would be great if we could just push off mortgage payments until everything settles out. But, it's just not a realistic expectation, because servicers and investors in those mortgages want to be paid. It has to be done, All right. So now
almost anything works until you get it out of the lab, though.
Right.
There's a reason why there's beta testing. Because all kinds of stuff works in a vacuum. It's when you subject it to reality. So let's talk a little bit about the other side, which is responsibility.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is pretty straightforward. Like, look, we have a contract that says you're going to pay on the 1st, and this is the amount of rent you're going to pay. If you don't pay, I'm going to kick you out. Straightforward, period, end of the story. I don't care what's going on. The tenant's got a responsibility to communicate with the landlord on any delays or problems that are occurring with the payment, and work out a payment arrangement for back rent after they vacate the property, because they still owe the money, right? Landlords are people, and like, part of the responsibility angle is for the tenant to realize, like, look, landlords are people just like me. They have obligations. They're counting on this money coming in, and they're depending on it on these timely payments, whether there's a mortgage or not. On the flip side, the landlord, they got to maintain the property. If somebody moves in and there's a jacuzzi tub in the property, and all of a sudden the jets break and the tenant or the landlord comes in with a $179 tub and replaces it, that's not acceptable. If they got to respond quickly to maintenance requests, and they got to do their best to stay out of the way of the tenant while they're doing it. Understand the financial setbacks of the tenant. Like, have a heart. These people are, right? I mean, like, that's what responsibility is about, is knowing that there's a risk that I'm going to have to evict this tenant. And if that happens, here's what I got to do. But before we get there, hey, sometimes people run into problems. They get in a car accident, the car breaks down, they have a death in the family that they have to pay for a funeral or something like that. Communication and finding simple solutions that don't end up in court or don't end up with somebody getting locked out of a property, that is really a responsibility of both sides of the equation. And then last but not least, I think that there are certainly, I see this occurring more with landlords that have been in C and D class neighborhoods for a very long time. There's a lot of landlord fatigue when it comes to dealing with tenants, and they no longer see people as human beings. It's like, yeah, they're going to call and complain about this, and there's going to be so many maintenance calls, and like, the humanity falls out of the transaction, and it ends up being a bad situation. And I think it's the responsibility of all of us to just treat each other with respect. and realize that we're in this together, whether we want to or not. Right. So with this as the backdrop, I was trying to think of, after we talked about Monday, some of the proposals that were being made about and the strings attached to all the money that is being proposed for these bailouts. I was trying to think of like the best case scenario for two sides of the equation. Like, how do we put tenants in a situation where if they've lost a job, they've got a financial issue, there's problems going on. How do we put them in a position where they're not having a negative impact on the landlord? They can be responsible, but at the same time, we keep them in the house, as best we can. And on the flip side, the landlord can be a little more flexible, let's say, with their terms and working things out. So this is what I came up with. We talked about a lot of bailout funds and bailout opportunities and things. I think the first thing would be like bailout loans for tenants. And my thought here is this, if you have, first of all, the tenant would have to show a financial hardship, especially with the $600, supplement that's been going on for the last couple months. It's hard to believe that 40% of tenants even if they got laid off, if they're receiving more money than they did before the shutdown, that they can't pay their rent.
So you're talking about showing a true financial hardship, not
That's right.
Not just a loss of a job, but also take into account unemployment or other benefits that they might be getting. And if they're getting those benefits, then they wouldn't qualify until those benefits expire for some reason.
That's right. That's right. That's the first thing. Number two, if we had the federal government create a fund to provide 0% interest loans that would cover rent up to a year after this pandemic ends. Because let's be honest, if you lost a job and you're having trouble finding a job, it can take a while, especially if we continue to have these these business bankruptcies and all of this high unemployment. So like, if we can provide the opportunity and the understanding to these tenants that, look, you're talking about 0% interest loan that you can pay back over a 10-year period. So instead of, paying $1,200 a month for your rent, it's going to cost you an extra $100 a month in 2 years, in 2 years. And in that time, get your stuff together, find yourself a good job, like stay in this house and don't mess around with stuff, pay your bills, all that kind of stuff. We'll worry about the rent later. Right. And then here's the big part. The funds don't go to the tenants. They don't. They go to the landlord directly. And it will be based on obviously they're going to have rental licenses and all that other junk that's got to go along with it. But the payment continues from this loan. And, let's say that the tenant has to sign off on every check or something like that. Some way that there's a balance there. But we get this set up so that all the past obligations are taken care of. And then future obligations are looked at on a month-to-month basis. Hey, you're back to work. You got your feet on the ground. Let's cut this thing off now. Something just to keep people paying and in the house. Now, Judah, I'm pushing this back to you. I want to hear why this is a mess.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. The only tricky situation there would be people all of a sudden claiming that they rent from a sister-in-law or something like that, where maybe it was a rent-free situation before, and there's all kinds of those challenges and things, and it would just need to be worked out in the minutia, and also there's got to be a trigger in there to make sure that it doesn't go on indefinitely. But
Absolutely.
I think that what you're talking about there, I especially really like the fact that it's paid out not in a lump sum to the landlord, and that it's paid out directly to the landlord as opposed to going through the tenant. That way, it frees up their budget to do other things, but that way also they can't, on a small level, misappropriate those funds anyway.
That's right. All right. Now, on the flip side, you've got the landlords. And I think there's two options here. The first option is a very similar bailout, right? You've got a tenant that's not paying excuse me, you got a tenant that's not paying, and for one reason or another, they're, whether it's they don't have a financial hardship, they just decide not to pay, they thumb their nose at the system, whatever. The landlord has the ability to go and apply for, again, same type of loan. Look, I got this financial hardship going on here. It's a 0% interest loan with payments to begin, 1 year after the pandemic. It'll cover mortgage payments for as long as the place is empty, or maybe it's just as the tenant goes through foreclosure for a short period of time. That's the bottom line, right? But these funds, they can only be used to bring the place current and to pay future rent obligations where there's a gap. And the big part here, I put payments made to the landlords. I don't think they're paid to the landlord. I meant to say they're paid to the mortgage companies. This is not a bailout for the landlord so that they can just throw a crappy tenant in the property and just sit on it and collect a 0% interest loan. It's a situation so that we don't have a ripple effect where our complete financial markets collapse. You've got a situation that's 0% interest. We're doing bailouts. We're printing money like it's going out of style anyway. But we might as well get a bang for a buck and stop the ripple. Stop the ongoing problem here. The other option here is a tax incentive for the landlords, either a credit or a deduction for lost rents during pandemic. And that would give landlords that are in a strong financial position the ability to get some kind of incentive here, or not incentive, but actually, yeah, it would be an incentive for them to get some kind of workout to keep the tenants in the property. Right. I mean,
you wouldn't need to do a tax credit or anything like that necessarily because you're only taxed on income that you actually receive. So
it could be against. You could use it as a deduction or a credit. Like, let's say
rent's against other income.
Exactly, for other income. So, like, if the rent's $1,000 a month and the tenant's not paying for a year,
you're saying that would be treated as opposed to looking at that as just non-income that you didn't earn and therefore you don't have to pay taxes on it. You would say that that's actually a business loss and should be able to be used to offset other income that you have.
I mean, it's just an idea because as I look at this, I think there's a couple problems that need to be overcome before any of this can even come into play. Number one, we need to reopen the economy tomorrow. Reopen everything, get people back to work, stop the millions of job losses every week, right? Number two, we got to open up the evictions. Like, at the same time that we say, okay, these are some options for you, we have to be able to get rid of tenants that should have been evicted before COVID, that would have been evicted throughout COVID had this thing not, the economy not been shut down.
Right.
The people that are, there are consistently non-payers that, mess with the system, that destroy the property, they're going to get evicted anyway. But I think the push here and the whole reason to come up with some kind of proposal that works is so that we can keep people that were artificially affected by this, that had a good job in February, that went to work every day, that were taking care of their family. But because the government shut everything down, now their job doesn't exist and they need some time to get back on their feet. And I think that by responding to the artificial nature of the brakes on the economy, it will, we'll be able to get back to business as usual and not have millions and millions and millions of evictions and foreclosures as a result, and people that are, they can't be tenants again. Like,
right.
You get evicted on Thursday, where are you going to move into? You're going to end up living with family members for a year or two,
right?
Because nobody's going to rent to you in a property that you want to live in. So, I mean, this and on this, on top of all of that, if there's a flush of vacancies, these landlords are going to get killed anyway, right? I mean, it's just, I don't know. I'd love to hear, from our viewers what they think about, about some of these proposals, or if they got any ideas on, on solving this issue. I don't want to let this go too long, we can't kick the can down the road too far before it really comes back to bite us. And as a nation, like we could, this thing could trigger a collapse of housing, a collapse of the mortgage industry, a collapse of the entire, underpinning of our financial institutions. And, it could be a very bad thing if it's
Yep.
left to go unchecked.
I think the only thing that your plan is missing is an acronym name. The Senate just released its plan for bailouts and recovery, and they call it the HEALS Act. If you look back through history, whenever there are these, whenever there's a key legislation anymore, they call it they call it something very specific. That stands for something. So you just gotta come up with an acronym, Josh, to help sell it, and you're well on your way.
Well, and I mean, usually the acronym spells out the opposite of what the bill actually does, though. So
Right. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I think that's the one thing that concerns me about government waste and abuse is how many creatives do we have in Washington D.C. just sitting around thinking up names for stuff to call this stuff, and uh, murdering their thesauruses to come up with words that'll fit to spell the desired acronym.
right, exactly. It's so funny. That
Great
reminds me.
show today, Josh. Really great viewership, and I'm sure that we're going to get a ton of feedback. We would love to hear what everybody has to say, and we would love to hear from everybody and let them know what content they're interested in. I'm currently working on lining up one of my attorneys to be on the show with us tomorrow
Yep.
to talk more about what is and isn't allowed in the eviction space right now. So watch tomorrow's show as we do a great attorney interview, and then Friday is going to be our news wrap up. Lots of great news, with the stock market. Some not so great news associated with the dollar. We're halfway through earnings report, and there is a lot of news to look at and digest and talk about what it means specifically from a real estate perspective. Thank you, everybody, very much for joining us today.
Thanks for joining us. We'll be back here tomorrow at noon. And until then, have a great day. Give us some feedback. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to like and share the video. We'll see you back here at noon tomorrow. Thanks, guys.